will be decided on character or policy?
I'll be engaging in the policy debate. And one of the things that strikes me is that the government had an opportunity in their budget to put forward a range of policies that were long-term. And all I saw was a budget which they didn't even talk about after 24 hours. A budget that handed off one-off payments, hoping that people would forget the cost of living pressures that they're under on a constant basis. Well, childcare costs don't stop once people have voted, nor does the rising costs of petrol or housing, energy costs. All of these things are going up, everything except people's pay. And this government have been complacent. We have put forward constructive plans, a range of policies out there on industry policy, communications, the economy, the environment and climate change, women's policies, policies on Indigenous affairs, policies across the spectrum. We'll continue to advocate for them because I don't think it's good enough for us to just stand still. Because in today's globalised world, if you're just trying to protect the status quo and keep things as they are, the rest of the world will just move past us.
Mr Albanese, if you win government, would your opposition frontbenchers serve in the same positions? There's talk, for example, of Richard Marles going back to defence.
Oh, look, it's my expectation that the front bench will serve in the same positions that they're in now. I'm very satisfied with my front bench. What I found extraordinary earlier on today was the Prime Minister's statement that Alan Tudge is still the Education Minister. Well, it just shows the chaos that's there. Even when people step aside, they've still got their job. The Prime Minister can't say who the Health Minister will be. The truth is that my front bench are all recontesting at this election. There's no one disappearing, there's no one withdrawing. And my front bench I have absolute faith in, and I would expect that the starting point would be that they would maintain the same positions that they hold now.
Mr Albanese,
this morning said that people are sick of politics. Do you share that sentiment, and are you expecting a real grind over the next 6 weeks?
Well, this is a Prime Minister who last year declared that he was campaigning and not governing. He's done that himself. All the photo ops that you've seen, that you would normally see during an election campaign from this Prime Minister, he started early, whether it was sitting in car racing at Bathurst or whether it be shampooing a young woman's hair or playing the ukulele or sitting in a fighter jet. We've seen it all. The problem for this government is that it stopped governing some time ago. I think that Australians want a government that does its job, that doesn't always blame someone else, that accepts responsibility. I'm putting forward a constructive alternative, as well as saying that I think that a government seeking a fourth term and a second decade in office, is this really as good as it gets? What we have seen from this government over that period of time is a whole lot of their talented and most competent people leave, which is one of the things that explains the incompetence that we've seen in simply managing portfolios over recent times. I'll give everyone a go.
Mr Albanese, can you tell us when we can start to expect some dollar figures around your policies, and can you put a dollar figure on how much money you expect to raise from the crackdown on multinational tax avoidance?
We've put dollars on our policies. If you look at, for example, our policy that I used to get asked about, and I'll bet you I don't today, on climate change. We were asked what our 2030 target would be. I said very early on that we would declare that after the Glasgow conference and after the government released a policy. We have, that's just one example of the most comprehensive, fully costed plan for any policy that any opposition has put forward since Federation. That outlines 604,000 new jobs to be created, $52 billion of private sector investment, 5 out of every 6 of those jobs in regional Australia. A plan that will see a 43% reduction by 2030. Our aged care plan that was a part of my budget reply has a cost of $2.5 billion over the forward estimates. Our childcare plan is fully costed. Our National Reconstruction Fund is out there for all to see. All of our policies that we've released have been fully costed, whether it be the National Broadband Network, whether it be the funding for black spots, the Regional Housing Program, the Housing Australia Future Fund. And there is another example. $10 million to be put in a fund that will be invested, of which the interest will be used to create 30,000 affordable and social housing units over a period of time. 4,000 of those quarantined for women and children escaping domestic violence. We have put out very costed policies. We will have more examples during the election campaign about the multinational tax changes that we'll be proposing. But I'll make this point. What is the government, that's our agenda, or just some of it, I could keep going, for the next term. What is this government's agenda for the next term?
Can I just confirm, sorry, Scott Morrison has obviously for not revealing who your Defence and Home Affairs ministers will be. Are you confirming that Brendan O'Connor and Christina Keneally will remain in those portfolios?
It's embarrassing for Scott Morrison, isn't it? The poor bloke can't say. He's got Greg Hunt leaving. He's the health minister during a pandemic, and he's leaving the parliament. So I'm not quite sure who the health minister is going to be. And the education minister, who stood aside, apparently is still in the cabinet as the education minister. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. I have said that I fully expect everyone to stay in their current jobs. Obviously, after the election, our caucus as a Democratic Party, elects the front bench, and we have an extraordinarily talented team. But I'm absolutely satisfied with the job that everyone is doing as part of that team. Yeah.
Labor is linked to recovery, and Australians don't know what it stands for. What do you say in response to this?
That I've outlined a range of policies that we would implement during the next term. Policies of cheaper, cleaner energy, which will drive the creation of new industries and new jobs through our National Reconstruction Fund, based upon the Clean Energy Finance Corporation model that this government tried to abolish. We'll train Australians for those jobs. We'll have a policy of lifting people's wages through the changes that we announced now almost 2 years ago for industrial relations, making sure that secure work is an objective of the Fair Work Act, properly defining casualisation, having same job, same pay, making wage theft a crime, closing the gender pay gap. We have outlined a series of policies for the election. Mr Morrison has not outlined any agenda for another term. And quite frankly, he suffered during this term from the fact that he sailed through the 2019 campaign without lining out a third term agenda, which is perhaps why he hasn't had one. But it's not good enough to say that you want a second decade in office without putting out exactly what your plans will be. What we know is from this government, because it's in their DNA, that it's likely to involve cuts to services, cuts to education, cuts to health, cuts to a range of services that Australians rely upon. And we know because we don't have to theorise what their attitude is towards cost of living, because all of the measures that they've brought in all expire as soon as people have cast their vote.
The PM has said this election is not about margins. Do you intend to make the campaign around